Call this meeting to order with the singing of our national anthem.
Hi there. My name is Jeff Exisa, and I'm a transportation planner with Dillon Consulting. So Dillon and Share the Road Cycling Coalition, we're working with the town of Orangeville to complete a cycling and trails master plan. And tonight I'm going to go over the plan, what we did, and some of the results we found. So to start the presentation, I'll talk a bit about the agenda. The agenda will follow a similar format to the presentation, or excuse me, the report itself. There'll be a brief introduction. We'll talk about the development of the plan. We'll talk about the implementation strategy, and we'll move into the conclusion. So at the introduction of the plan, for the first thing to understand is, what is a cycling master plan? So a cycling master plan, or cycling and trails master plan, is a long-range transportation planning document intended to support and guide the planning, design, and implementation of cycling and trails facilities within the community. So in order to do this, or how should I say, why would we do this? So first of all, we looked at all the benefits of cycling and trails within the community. So I won't go through them all in a lot of detail because the presentation is relatively brief, but there's lots of benefits to cycling and trails throughout the community. There's active living and health benefits, there's social and safety benefits, there's economic benefits, tourism benefits, environmental and transportation. I'll just touch on this one figure up here. This figure is pretty striking. It shows obesity rates versus percentage of population who cycle, walk, and use public transit throughout North America and Europe. So that's just one of sort of many pieces of information we researched on the benefits of cycling and trails. And you'll know that, I'm sure you noticed when you read it, it's quite extensive. So in order to do a presentation or a project like this, we first need to understand Orangeville, the community that we did the plan for. So the one thing that struck us about Orangeville initially is that Orangeville is relatively small and dense, which makes it perfect for cycling and trails. The size of Orangeville is particularly great in the sense that cycling and walking trips can be made over most of Orangeville relatively easily. So Orangeville's form is very very positive for cycling and trails to begin with. And some other trends we found, some highlights were the fact that the average age in Orangeville is approximately 38.8, slightly lower than the provincial average. So there's quite a few young families in Orangeville that can take advantage of these cycling and trails facilities, as well as the senior population is increasing. And cycling and trails facilities also provide seniors quite a bit of opportunity, especially older seniors who maybe don't have opportunity to use a car any longer. So the development of the plan. So when we started developing the plan, we had to come up with a vision. So this vision was developed through the key priorities outlined in the strategic plan, as well as input from stakeholders and community engagement. So I'll read the vision. The town of Orangeville will provide all of its residents opportunities for active living and a high quality of life by ensuring that walking and cycling are convenient, comfortable, and sustainable modes of transportation for all ages, abilities, and trip purpose. So there's quite a bit there, but the key takeaway is that comfortable is critical. If you build a cycling facility and people are afraid to use it, then there's no point in building it. So it needs to be comfortable for everyone, and age and ability and trip purpose. So typically we think of when we build cycling and trails infrastructure, we build it for children and seniors, the most vulnerable users. You could build it for cyclists like myself who will cycle anywhere, but that doesn't benefit the community. And for all trip purpose. We need to not be so concerned about the journey to work. The journey to work is just a small piece of commuting. There's lots of other cycling and trails trips that are much shorter that can be made through this. And then we came up with some specific goals and objectives that were developed in context to put the study in context, and then a set of principles which were originally developed in the 2008 Trails Master Plan and were modified to include cycling. So the first step is these existing conditions. So we went on a bike tour with a local bike shop owner, Jeff Lemon, and he sort of showed us the highs and lows of cycling and trails in Orangeville. So I'll just point out a few really quickly. So some of the highs are the pedestrian underpass under the bypass, the amount of cycling and trails activity in and around Island Lake. We saw tons of people headed there. Some of the new super share infrastructure. And then some of the lows are the crossing of Highway 10. You can see there's a sidewalk with a sign that says, pedestrians yield to cars, and then the sidewalk goes to nowhere. So Orangeville has great bones, but there's definitely some room for improvement. And overall, the community has currently approximately 20 kilometers of shared roadway, 3.4 kilometers of bike lane, about 20.8 kilometers of multi-use trail, and about 4 kilometers of greenway trail. And the greenway trail would not include Island Lake. So developing the future network. So we have the base now, and then now what do we do? So we had to go out and we needed to engage the public. So we can't come into a community and do a plan like this without getting thorough quite a bit of info from the public. I mean, we can't just write this plan without them. I mean, I don't live in Orangeville, so we did that we did a stakeholder workshop on August 8th, and as well as a formal PIC the same day. We did a pop-up consultation at Taste of Orangeville on the 18th of August, and we ran a digital engagement platform for 2 months where we distributed little business cards directing people to the website to provide feedback. And we did that at Rotary Ribfest, as well as Taste of Orangeville, and through the bike shop that Jeff Lemon owns. So the two big pieces that we heard were complete the network and improve the understanding. So on the infrastructure side and on the soft side. So then once we took all this data, we compiled it. This is looking specifically at infrastructure. We compiled quite a significant list of trails and cycling pieces. And then we went back to the community to have them vote on the ones that resonated with the most, that they could see the most use. And then overall, we ranked them. So the public feedback was a key in the ranking, but we also ranked them on community connectivity, expected user demand, cost estimate, and property limitations. So for example, if it had a property limitation of Highway 10, you'd have to get MTO involved, things like that. So overall, we came up with a rank. This is a map showing high level of what we found. What you can see on it, there's lots of cycling and trails infrastructure, and we divided them into roughly thirds, sort of high priority, medium priority, and low priority. And you can see those by the green is high, yellow is medium, and red is low. There's quite a bit of info on this map, but I know you've had a chance to digest it. So I guess what I'll point out is the high point of this is the rail corridor through town. Orangeville has an excellent and unique opportunity to provide a high quality piece of infrastructure right through the heart of town. Not many communities have that opportunity. So that would probably be one of the highs, and then as well as finishing the infrastructure along Hanson would be another critical spine along the north end of town. And there's various other ones, but you can see sort of some of the trails in the periphery of town have lower scores, and again, that's because although they might be a great trail, they don't really connect to too much. The expected user demand would be low. So everything on this map is important, but obviously you can't build everything. So we need to try and prioritize what will get you the most value in usage and cost. And then, so on top of this, we have an implementation strategy, and it looked at operation and maintenance. So at a high level, it looked at the core network and the winter network. So core network is just of the cycling and trails networks, you want to identify the ones that are the most important, and you need to maintain all your main trails to a standard, but maybe you could focus on that core network for a little bit more. And then your winter network will likely be the same as your core network, and that would be a network of trails and cycling routes that you would plow in order to have year-round facilities. And also programming recommendations. We heard a lot from the community about programs that are current and programs that they would like to see. So again, at a high level, we look at there's 3 E's. So the hard side that we talked about was the engineering, but there's also education, which could be public awareness campaigns, encouragement, car-free days, enhancing the bike valet that you already do, enforcement, doing a bylaw review for active transportation, and evaluation and planning. So cycling trails evaluation, maybe some trail counters, things like that, to collect some data to see what your usage is. And last but not least is staffing capacity. Hiring an active transportation and transportation demand management coordinator would be very helpful in achieving this goal. We know that communities that have a dedicated staff person are much more successful than those that don't. So in conclusion, the Orangeville Cycling and Trails Master Plan is a flexible and adaptive blueprint meant to guide town staff and its partners on future cycling and trails decision-making, while informing the town's budgeting process to guide the implementation of town-wide cycling and trails infrastructure and initiatives identified in the plan. The infrastructure and initiatives outlined in this plan build on past success and identify new and improved vision for growth to make the town of Orangeville a more walkable, bikeable town for people of all ages and abilities. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Andrews.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship, and I didn't get your name, and I apologize, and Jeff. Well, Jeff, I do want to commend the report, and again, having gone through this as my fellow councilors have, this is probably one of the most extensive reports that I've seen that's detailed as it is, and it took several reads, but I'm most impressed by the amount of work that you and those that are tied to this have gone through. And some of the individuals that you've mentioned, I think many of us also are aware of their impact in the community. This is really a culture shift. This is a mindset shift for a lot of people in this community. I know that you've echoed right from the get-go that you are an avid cyclist. I'm kind of a quasi-cyclist when I have the time, and I think that this is something that those in the community have to look at. And I think the questions that I wanted to pose are not just to you, Jeff, but also to town staff, in this case, Mr. Osmond, who was very kind to provide some additional input on some questions that I had. And I think diving right into this particular report, as I've mentioned, it is somewhat of a cultural shift. You know, it's one that you take a look at society, the convenience of a vehicle. You know, we look at a bike as, or walking as kind of our main source of getting from A to B. One of the difficulties we have in our community is that we have a community that was built the way it was, and then we also have some of the new development where you can end up having some of the new trails, the new walkways, the bike paths that can end up conforming to the needs of the society that may end up wanting to bike. But Mr. Osmond, and through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Osmond, will we have to look at if this plan is implemented, and again, this is why it's in front of council right now, and again, I have to commend the team for the amount of work that has gone into this. Will there have to be some changes to some of the things that we're doing today to implement some of the things that could be coming down the pipeline in the future? As an example, you know, you look at optional bikes that are out there, velomobiles, for example, which I'm a huge fan of. You know, allows an aging population to still bike, but also bike with, you know, a little more safety at hand, an enclosed type of configuration. Will we have to look at some of those options moving forward?
Through Your Worship to Councillor. Good question. One of the good things about this report, and as you said, is extensive, is the question of making sure that we look at bylaws and those kinds of things that impact what we do in terms of the infrastructure, what we do in terms of what kinds of equipment goes on this particular walkway or cycleway. It's interesting because, as you noted in earlier emails, the fact is we have equipment now that's partially, you know, driven by the person, or in some cases augmented by some electric generation of power. We would have to definitely look at our bylaws, making sure that some of this equipment can have access to a walkway system. The thing that would happen is that we'd have to also look at the, when we do design the walkway, and the standard would be from 3 to 4 meters. And again, depending on where you're going to use it, as an example, if we do a corridor along the trail or the railway corridor, we have a certain width, we have a bigger width. We could do a different kind of a walkway that gives you a more connection, north to south, east, west, whatever the case might be. So good point, yes, we would have to look at bylaws and we cross those various bridges when we come to a particular design.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you, Mr. Osmond.
Yeah, personally think implementing a cycle and trails master plan really helps us from a tourism standpoint. I know a lot of communities that have embraced biking, and they're reaping the benefits of it. So I'm really encouraged by this. We have to hear about the numbers, though, and see what it would cost, but I like what I see so far. Any other councillors wish to comment here? Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Jeff, thank you for your efforts on this and your team. Also, Mr. Raymond, or Mr. Osmond, who coordinated the effort. Just so everyone in the gallery and online knows, a portion of this was funded through a provincial grant, so we're also very grateful for that opportunity. I think having this plan in place allows us, when we're looking at the redevelopment of roads and the connections in town, gives us a good framework. And having attended several of the public consultation sessions that were held, it had quite a bit of public feedback and good commentary, not just from the avid cycling community, but all sort of age ranges and ability levels. So I'm very happy to see this in front of us, and I'd like to make the motion if I could.
Yeah, please. Motion to receive this document, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Jeff, thank you for your presentation tonight. Okay, our next delegation, Mr. Jim Hill. Winter parking. Sir.
Members of Council, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about Montgomery Village parking. For those who are not familiar with Montgomery Village, they are one-way streets, and the red lines is where originally the overflow parking was 24 years ago when they were, sorry. Do you want me to start again?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead.
So 24 years ago when I moved into Montgomery Village, when it was a brand new subdivision, those parking spots with the red lines were considered overflow parking until probably about 12, 14 years ago when they put signs up for snow removal, stuff like that there. 2 years ago, I came in front of council because all of a sudden we started getting parking tickets because with the parking that there is right now, my children grew up, there's only a maximum of 2 spots for parking. I personally only have 1. And children get older, circumstances change, and they get cars, and there's nowhere else to park. We're surrounded by Montgomery Village Public School, and there's Westside Secondary School, and further down there's a no-frill, so obviously you can't park there. You can see the layouts. You can see on the top right, like the one house just has the one garage. House beside it has parking spot for 2 cars. My particular garage, this is actually an old picture. I cheated a little bit. This step's even bigger now, but the back alleyways where they have it, they haven't been maintained, so you can't even drive a car in there without doing damage to your car. And so that's why we end up using the overflow parking. I'll just go down My neighbor, 2 doors up, he actually took his fence down and is parking on his back lawn because he doesn't want to have to deal with the tickets, which I think is ridiculous. Like, he has 2 young kids, so the kids can't even build snowmen in the backyard because daddy's going to come home from work at night and drive them over. This picture on the right, the white vehicle is actually mine. He went away for a week, and he said I could park in one of his spots. And that's just an example of the kind of community we have. He's just trying to save me tickets because we don't have an option of anywhere else to park. Plus the security too. Like, he's taken his fence down and has left his whole backyard open, which I don't think is a good thing. And just having his kids just playing out in the backyard. And I don't think this is a good attraction for people to come to the community. I took some examples. Like, I think almost 70% of people work day shift. So most people are at work during the day. I don't understand why they can't be plowed during the day, and why does it have to be overnight? It's not the same plow that does the roads, that does the actual parking spots. It's a pickup truck with a blade on it. At least during the day, if people are home, they can park on the street, and the plows can plow the parking spots, so nobody has to park there anyway. It's just another example of like how it's empty, and like, well, one of the snow fell like 3 days and it hadn't been plowed yet. A lot of people, I set up an email account, a Gmail account, and put them on the community post boxes and asked people to email me and give me their thoughts. And there was actually one of the slides that I had put on here, but I had to remove it because I had a lot of personal information and stuff like that there. And normally when you put something like that out, you get some negativity from like putting yourself out there. And I didn't receive one email to say, no, we disagree with you, we want it all plowed in the middle of the night or whatever. There is different parking bylaws, like different areas that you park. I know they open up Fenley for parking, but that's nowhere near Montgomery Village, really. Like to walk there at night or whatever, I don't think it's very viable. There is some areas off Montgomery Village where they have parking spots that don't even have a sign up. So I don't understand why all of a sudden this is an issue. As I said, 2 years ago, we started getting parking tickets. I actually got 37. And when I came to council, they said they would look at it and nothing changed. And then last year, they actually named the alleyways. So because the tickets were actually thrown out of court because the ticket said that I was parked in an alleyway behind Montgomery Boulevard. So to combat that, the alleyways were named. So now this particular alleyway is named Daisy Lane. So now the tickets can be written. Last year I only got 1 ticket and paid it. This year I have 47 and go to court tomorrow actually. And but now the tickets say you were parked on Daisy Lane. So basically I've got no option. I got no fight. I can't do anything. Like do I sell my house? Do I move? Like I don't know. I think the only solution, well, there's a couple of solutions, I think, but I don't see why it can't be plowed during the day. Like if they need a 5-hour window like it has right now from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., it could be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. if that's viable. You're also paying somebody night shift premium to plow them at nighttime, but you can pay them during the day and it'd be day shift. Or there's the option of parking permits for households to obtain a parking permit. Like my daughter comes home, and where's she going to park? And that was a lot of the emails that I had from people, like their kids are coming home from university, and all they get, like, yeah, they get to see their parents, but they also get a parking ticket because they only have 2 spots. So they have to park at the end as well. One lady said, my daughter lives in Ottawa, you can park on the street at night to have and you have to move your car by 7 a.m. so that they can clear the snow. Another lady said that she's contacted council, sent letters, and nothing else. And just a whole bunch of, like, add my name to the list, and we're there to support you, and thanks for doing this, and so on. And really, I don't know what else to say.
Okay, so just to wrap this up, Mr. Hill, what are you recommending? What do you think is the solution here?
I don't see why it can't be applied during the day, when almost 70% of people are at work anyway. The spots are empty, and I think that's the biggest
Well,
thing. You don't want cars
we can't
there.
decide our plowing on what one resident wishes to happen, right? We have to, you know.
No, I'm not just
we've
one
got our-
resident. I'm just,
Well,
I've got emails.
we're doing our plowing at night. That's the way it is, and we're not changing that for, you know, to solve your problem. So that's not going to happen, so.
Why is that? What do you mean? That's a bit stubborn, though. It's not, they close.
No, it's reality. I'm not being stubborn. this is how the town Public Works Department has planned snow removal services. It happens at night. So we're not really going to change that for this situation. And
Well, like you look at that, they didn't remove the snow. And that's like 3 days
well,
later.
I don't know all the circumstances here. There's been some significant snow events that happen. We don't always clear in 5 hours. It takes a lot longer than 5 hours to clear this town of snow.
Days.
So, yeah, it can take some time.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Jones, do you have a comment on snow removal overnight?
Thank you, Your Worship. I did include a memo that we had provided to council previously on this particular issue in parking in this particular laneway, as another gentleman approached council on this back in January. As you've noted, the service that we provide is to plow as many streets as we can overnight, as well as municipal parking lots to prepare them for use during the day. These parking lots are a little different than the ones downtown, certainly. They were originally constructed at a time when it was anticipated that there would be commercial uses along Montgomery Boulevard, as was originally the plan, I believe, back in the 90s. When that changed, these did become essentially parking that permitted people to utilize them for guests. But to the best of my knowledge, parking has always been prohibited overnight to allow for snow clearing. In terms of the snow not being cleared for some days, we do periodically get complaints as it relates to those lots not being properly cleared. It is difficult for us to clear those when there are cars parked in them, and it is generally overnight that we try and clear them.
Right. Okay. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do feel for your problem. I'm quite familiar with that street. However, I believe that's called visitors parking for a reason. It's for visitors, it's not for the homeowners themselves. There's a number of subdivisions like yours that have that same setup where you have visitor parking. If we were to allow it here, we'd have to allow it everywhere. And trust me, we don't want to open that can of worms. So I sympathize with you, but I don't see that we can do anything right now. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Again, the problem with paying for parking, it's visitors parking. Everybody's entitled to it. If somebody lives up there, they're entitled to have visitors go there. If we were to charge for those parking spots, then that would be taken away from those people. And there's more than one family living in that subdivision that we have to consider. Visitors are going to be ticketed too. If they stay overnight, yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I certainly sympathize with the issues that you're having. I guess for me, there was a solution that was brought up last council meeting, and it was brought forward by our mayor, and it was the idea of looking at an app to be able to rent out other people's parking spots that would be in the neighborhood. So essentially you could park in your neighbor's driveway and you would pay them a fee to be able to do that. So that was one of the creative solutions. The other one, and I wanted to just ask Mr. Jones again, Rotary Park and Fenley Park, perhaps just you could educate the public again on those two lots. Personally, I thought that worked out well. I understand there's some trepidation with it. The idea would be is you would park in Rotary Park or Fenley Park, which is a bit of a drive, I understand that, but the reality is we're in a small town. It's really not that far. You could take your guests there, park in those two lots, and go from there. But Mr. Jones probably could speak to it better than I can.
Mr. Jones.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Taylor. This was something that was brought to council several years ago. Residents had expressed concerns periodically about the overnight parking ban, more for parking on roads than specifically in parking lots. The question was always, well, you know, if we have guests staying over, we don't have room in our driveways, where are we going to put vehicles? And staff really had no answer. And a couple of years ago, the idea was brought forward that we would utilize a couple of parking lots in town. Fenley and Rotary were selected for the very reason that neither is used to any extent in the winter. These are parking lots that are used exclusively in the summer, and by having people utilize them in the winter, people who might stay overnight in those lots wouldn't inconvenience anybody who was going to be utilizing them during the day. So we did implement that with some success, and it's now become a permanent feature. And we set it up every winter so that people can go there, and we do maintain those parking lots such that people can utilize those. I recognize that of course those two parking lots are not within walking distance of every home in town. It simply would be impractical to try and provide that sort of parking within walking distance for every home in town. But the hope would be that people could coordinate it with others who are already parked in their home to pick them up or drop them off. It's not the most convenient, but it's the best that staff could offer at the time.
And you want to live in Montgomery Village, like, basically you're saying, yeah, we'll live there, but as soon as our kids are old enough to have a car, then no, you got to move out. Because there's nowhere for their kids to park. Like, that's blind thinking. I don't get it. Like, it was a bad design to start off with, and now we're paying for it.
Yeah. Like, Mr. Hill, at Christmas, I sat down with a resident of the West End, and she'd recently moved from Brampton, moved to a newer home off of Hanson Veteran Way subdivision there. She had 2 parking spots, and she moved from Brampton with her family with 4 cars. Now, I'm sorry, but you know, we're not responsible for finding parking spots for you.
Oh, I understand that.
And what Mr. Jones has said, we've tried to find a solution for overnight parking, and it means a shuttle service for a kilometer in your case, or half a kilometer. I don't know what else we can offer to you, sir. And you know, we don't have a magic potion here to create more parking spots, and we have to have the streets cleared for winter maintenance. In fact, in Brampton, they don't just ticket you, they tow you in Brampton if you're on the streets there. So we're trying to work with people, but there is no solution if you've got more cars in your home than parking spots that are available to you.
So what changed 2 years ago then? Because
In
I've
what
lived
sense?
there. What changed 2 years ago? Because 23 years I've lived there. 2 years ago I started getting tickets. I never got a ticket before that.
Enforcement,
was there somebody
enforcement of a
with that?
bylaw. Enforcement of a bylaw.
It took them that long to enforce a bylaw?
I presume
21
that there were
years?
multiple complaints, and that we decided that it was time to enforce the bylaw.
And then last year I got 1 ticket? And then this year I got 47?
Well, if
You know why?
if you-
Because
if
the
you-
alleyway was named, that's why. They put Dizzy Lane on there, everybody had a name, and then that's
Well,
why it was enforced again
It's
this year.
it's more than likely that they didn't ticket you while the lanes were being named, because they knew that tickets were going to be thrown out of court,
Exactly.
and which they were. So now they're not thrown out of court,
So
and
it's all
the
about-
enforcement began again.
It's
right?
all about getting
So-
the money then.
Well, that's the only way we can enforce our bylaws, sir, is by enforcing them with parking tickets, and I don't know, there's really nothing that I can say or do to solve that right now, unless somebody here has got some,
Magic wand? I doubt it.
I don't, so.
Okay.
So thank you for your time today, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to move on to 8.1, which is a statutory public meeting, and Deputy Mayor McIntosh is going to take over.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to go through the procedure for tonight. First of all, anyone who speaks and/or wants to be notified of further discussions on this topic that we will be discussing by council to complete the notification list on the table. First, we'll start off with a presentation by town planning staff.
Thank you, Chair McIntosh, and good evening, everyone. Tonight's public meeting is a statutory public meeting. Requirements of the Planning Act for a zoning bylaw amendment application that's been filed with the town. The application pertains to lands located at 279 Broadway, and the purpose of the application is to add a medical center as a permitted use in addition to the range of uses otherwise permitted for the subject property. The purpose of the application is to facilitate a physiotherapy clinic use within the existing building on the premises. So the subject property is located again at 279 Broadway, specifically being the northwest corner of the intersection of Broadway and Clara Street and Center Street. The slide in front of you shows an aerial photograph of the subject lands as well as surrounding land uses. As you can see in the attached photo, the subject property contains an existing building located at the more the northwest corner of the subject lands. There are two access points situated on Broadway as well as on Clara Street. I would note that sorry, I'm just trying to get this to work. It's not. The subject lands benefit from a lease agreement with the town for additional parking lands situated within the right-of-way on the south side of Broadway, just immediately to the west of Center Street. And this agreement resulted from a realignment of the Center Street and Clara Street intersection to consolidate those access or entrances with Broadway. As a result, the realignment removed some land from the subject property and added surplus land to the Center Street right-of-way to the south of Broadway, which gained additional surplus parking lands. So to compensate for that, the town entered into a lease agreement with the subject property for additional parking for this property allocated to it on the south side of Broadway. So the images in front of you are some site photos of the subject property. The photo on the bottom of the slide shows an existing business office to the north. And these photographs show existing commercial uses to the south side of Broadway, as well as commercial uses further adjacent to the subject lands to the west, shown at on the lower photo. So this is an excerpt of the existing site plan, and as you can see, it highlights the existing access configuration. The applicants have proposed through the submission of this application to introduce some restrictions to the existing access to Broadway to basically improve upon the access configuration. They're proposing to restrict that to a right turnout only movement. That's to alleviate some public works comments that were expressed through pre-submission consultation with respect to the operation of that existing entrance. So the official plan designates the subject property as neighborhood commercial. As you can see in the slide in front of you, it's consistent with some of the neighborhood commercial designation that applies to the surrounding properties. So this designation applies to commercial areas that are in proximity to residential areas, and it intends to accommodate retail and service commercial uses at somewhat of a moderate scale. Among the permitted uses include service establishments, And the proposed physiotherapy clinic use is interpreted to be consistent with the service establishment land use permissions provided by the official plan. Therefore, an official plan amendment application is not required in support of this zoning bylaw amendment application. So similarly, the zoning bylaw zones the subject lands as neighborhood commercial, or C2. The permitted uses are listed in the slide in front of you. Some of these uses are very similar in nature to the proposed use being sought through this application. The applicant is seeking a medical center establishment. This is in support of a physiotherapy clinic. The applicant has also indicated that they may be introducing different medical or sort of clinical practices as part of this clinic. A medical center is not listed among the permitted uses for the C2 zone, so therefore the applicant has applied to amend the zoning bylaw on a site-specific basis to add this use to that existing range of permitted uses. And also, as part of this application, the applicant is looking to address some of the existing as-built conditions with the subject property that are currently deficient to some of the zone standards within the C2 zone category, i.e. lot area, some yard setbacks, et cetera. They're also looking to acknowledge or formally recognize that existing off-site parking lease arrangement that will basically formalize that off-site arrangement and give it somewhat of a status in the zoning bylaw. So as part of our typical review of this application, we circulated it to internal departments and external agencies for their review and comment. And at this point in time, we've received no concerns from Rogers Communication, Enbridge Gas, Orangeville Fire Services, and our Public Works Division. And in addition, through the public consultation process thus far, we've received no formal comments or concerns from any members of the community. So the next steps in the processing of this application include tonight's public meeting, whereby we'll take the comments and questions received into consideration as part of our overall review of this application. At some point in the future, we anticipate bringing forward a staff recommendation report for council's ultimate decision on the application. So that concludes my presentation. My contact information is on the slide in front of you, should anyone wish to submit any questions or comments specifically to my attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. We'll take questions after the next presentation. If I could call on Valerie Schmidt, planning consultant on behalf of the applicants. Welcome.
Oh, shoot. Where do you start this? I should know this. Oh, no, that's it. I just have to get it started. Ah, there. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name's Valerie Schmidt, and I'm from GSP Group, and I'm in here in support of the application. Also with me are representatives from Hammer Investments, in case there's any questions that you wanted to direct to them directly. I just have a brief presentation. I think Brandon's report pretty much, or his presentation and report pretty much covered everything. And just to quickly go through the background of the site, it's currently operated by a spa and a hair salon. It's designated neighborhood commercial in the official plan. It's zoned neighborhood commercial in the zoning bylaw. The applicants are proposing to operate a physiotherapy office with additional medical professionals that may occupy the space as well. As you know, it's located at the corner of Broadway and Clara with frontage onto Broadway. So what the applicant is proposing is, under the zoning bylaw, would be defined as a medical center. Currently, there's 14 parking spaces on the site. As Brandon had mentioned, there was a previous minor variance application that approved to reduce the parking spaces to 10, and there's a current lease with the town for 10 parking spaces in the lot across the street, and that lease is good until April 2018, or 28. Also, as mentioned, there was concern from the town about the access kind of being used as a shortcut to bypass the intersection. The solution was to put up exit-only, do not enter signage, and the applicants were okay with this solution. It'll be implemented if approved. Once again, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is just to add a medical center as permitted use. As mentioned before, a professional office is currently permitted in the C2 zone, and that includes a physician, a chiropractor, any kind of therapist, dentist, architect as such. What we're proposing is just to be able to have multiple practitioners in the building. We're also recognizing the existing conditions, so the lot area, side yards, rear yards, and also to recognize the existing parking arrangement on the site. Assessing this application in terms of provincial and local policies, it's consistent with the PPS, it conforms to the growth plan, it conforms to the County of Dufferin official plan, and it conforms to the Town of Orangeville official plan. From our professional planning opinion, we believe that the medical services it'd be good planning. It's in closeness to public transit and other residential neighborhoods. It's utilizing the existing building and its efficient use of the site and existing road services. The site is fully serviced, it's appropriate and compatible. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Any questions for either town planning staff or Mrs. Schmidt? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor McIntosh. And just a comment, again, this is a rather attractive building in its proximity in the town, and appreciate the detail that Mr. Ward provided as well as yourself. Also appreciate the fact that there is proposed signage. You know, having gone through that intersection, and not to say that I've counted on both hands and both my feet the number of people that use it as a shortcut, but I think that will at least put hopefully a stop to the points that people use that. I guess the question I do have for Mr. Wharton, again, I appreciate the clarity, and I guess for those that are in the audience and those that are watching, this particular revision or proposed revision would enable the property owner, if they so desired, if at some point within the agreement between the salon and the spa, to have that entire building housed as a medical center, so other practitioners could end up certainly conducting their business there. Okay. So if I'm correct in saying so, is that right, Mr. Ward?
Through you, Chair McIntosh, to Councillor Andrews, yes, that's correct. They're looking to add this use in addition to the range of otherwise permitted uses on the property. The medical center definition permits a multitude of professionals occupants of different medical disciplines or practices.
Okay, thank you for the clarity. Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ward, I've got two questions, actually. So the first is regarding the lease of the parking spaces on the opposite side. Is that tied to the ownership of the building, or is that tied to the site itself? For example, if and when that building changes hands, does that agreement remain in place, or is that tied to the current ownership?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters, the agreement is registered on title, so it does run with the land. So if a current owner, or if a new owner acquires the property, it will apply to the new ownership.
Okay, thank you. And then for the second one, could be either one of you all, see who fields the question, but I appreciate the comments about the shortcut, because I was going to bring that up as well. That seems to address traffic from the west cutting onto Clara, but I know a lot of people take that as sort of a nice right-hand turn from Clara to Broadway, and I don't know if there's a way to address that flow of traffic. I would say, in fact, that happens more often than the opposite direction. So whether or not that's part of this application, I think it's worth considering as staff look at the lot arrangement.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions from council, any questions from the public in regards to this Seeing none, can I have a motion to accept the report? Councillor Sherwood, Mayor Brown, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 10.1, review of policing services. So this is obviously a very important issue to our town, and one that we've been in contact with town staff in terms of laying out the chronology for the review of a determination of OPP versus OPS policing services for our town. So in this, in the document, we have a suggested layout of how this would flow. And for those in the audience, I'll just recap it briefly here. On December 10th, 2018, Council passed a resolution requesting the Ontario Provincial Police prepare a costing proposal for the provision of policing services in Orangeville. January the 8th, notification from OPP that the request was approved. January 18th, there was an initial meeting between the OPP and the town. On April 29th, there was a presentation made by the OPP explaining how their billing model works. On May 13th, the council passed a resolution directing the CAO to issue a request for proposal for consultants to analyze the cost of services outlined in the OPP costing proposal and the costs and services currently provided by Orangeville Police Service. And on January 10th, we have a scheduled presentation of the OPP costing proposal at our next council meeting. Following that, there will be an analysis of the OPP costing proposal, and the proposed timeline after the OPP costing is received is as follows. In June of 2019, the town will be hiring a consultant. On proposed council meeting of August the 12th, having the Orangeville Police Service present its annual report to council, and community information and a Q&A session meeting with the OPS. In September, at a council meeting yet to be determined, a community information and Q&A meeting with the OPP. And on September either 9th or 23rd, the mayor and CEO of municipalities that have gone through the OPP costing will be available to discuss the transition process and answer any questions of council. Proposal October 21st, presentation of the consultant's report, and then November 4th, staff report and recommendation to council on policing services, and then following that, a vote by town council on whether retaining Orangeville Police Service or moving to the OPP. Councillors, do we have any comments? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a few things in here I'd just like to comment on, specifically the timelines and how this will go. And there's some questions in this report that the public can read through, and I guess that's specifically what I'd like to push my comments towards. And that is the timeline. So to me, you know, I know we're going to have the costing. To me, we should have the summer to consult with the residents. That would be my wish. And the way that would be done is through email, your activities out in the community during the summer, that sort of thing. To have a Q&A session in July or August would be a travesty for something that's so important. And I know I'm being dramatic, but the reality is people just aren't around as much as they would be. We turn the page, September is renewal. That would be the suggestion for me of when we should have the Q&A. The next piece I'd like to comment on is the mayor versus an outside facilitator. I'll leave that to you, Your Worship. I certainly trust your judgment and how you would decide to go about that. But my comment to the rest of council would be is I was at the meeting last time we went through this, and the criticism of council, and I respect all of those past individuals that sat up here, but the reality is they weren't visible in that meeting. I think it was a mistake. I think that it was planned in earnest and in a benevolent way, but we should be visible in some sort of way to make sure that the residents know that we're there, we're accountable, and we're listening to what people are saying and understand the facts. Then my next point would be, it is inappropriate to have it in this facility that we're sitting in tonight. I think ODSS is the best spot in town where we could do that. We should facilitate a date where that we can have this open meeting and be in that facility if at all possible. And I understand that there would be a cost associated with that, but we could work with the Upper Grand. The other things to contemplate here is do we have a representative from another municipality who has gone OPP? And my answer to that would be yes. I'd love to hear from them. There's plenty of opportunities to talk to those people. The town and the citizens should all know what those people have experienced. However, I'd also like to add that it would be interesting to have someone who has had a bad experience or a difficult experience, for a better way to phrase it, with the OPP, and specifically I think about St. Mary's. You know, if as an example, if someone from that area could come to our meeting, I think that would be good in terms of our fact finding. So thank you to my fellow council members, but that's my thoughts at this time.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just add one quick note to Councillor Taylor's comments. In speaking about the timing of each of these, if we are going to have those guests join us from other municipalities, I'd like to see the town have already gone through the OPS and OPP presentations so that we have as much of that information on hand. If we bring them in between the two presentations, for example, that conversation may not be as fruitful. So it hasn't been laid out exactly. That's what we're trying to do now, but I would suggest that that sort of third-party consultation happen after those two costing Q&A sessions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Post.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo the comments by my fellow councillors and just have one thing to add to one of Councillor Taylor's, and perhaps it can go through you to Chief Kalinsky, if that's possible. With regards to when the OPS present the annual report, I do see the note in our report asking whether the presentation of that report, which is normally done in September, should be held in August. I had similar concerns, but perhaps we could direct that to Chief Kalinsky to find out if he finds that that's an appropriate timeline, or if perhaps that would be better pushed to September as suggested.
Okay. Chief Kalinsky.
We will abide by council's decisions as to whatever process you want. The only clarification I want to make is that the annual report and the presentation are two totally different things in the police world, and we want to make a presentation that is similar to the one that's presented by the Ontario Provincial Police. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the things I wanted to bring up as well was I had concerns about the August 12th date for the OPS presentation. I just think time-wise, a lot of people are vacationing or whatever. I would like to see that pushed further into September when we, I think we have a better opportunity to have more people present. Going back with the facilitating, I was strongly impressed with the facilitator last time, who I have seen facilitate many items. Nigel Belchamber, I believe, was the gentleman. If yes, I would strongly recommend that we rehire Mr. Belchamber. That kind of puts you out of the hot seat for keeping things moving along. I would also, I'm okay with using the ODSS cafeteria. However, I'm more inclined to go with our own facility, which would be the Tony Rose Memorial Sports Center. And I think other than that, I'm okay with the timeline other than the OPS presentation on August 12th.
Okay. So, okay, Councillor Taylor.
Just one last comment. Thank you, Councillor Sherwood, for your comments. I do think that that night will be an incredibly sensitive night with emotions running high. And my comments are about the mayor versus the outside facilitator again. I trust the judgment of Mayor Brown to determine if that's the right move or not to make and having him facilitate it. And I guess all of Orangeville would know, and Mayor Brown, I don't mean to put this on your shoulders, but it was your campaign that brought this forward. Council supported you unanimously to find the facts, but it was your campaign that brought forward the OPP, not anyone else's. So in my mind, it would be appropriate that you would host that meeting, but certainly would leave it to you to decide.
Right. Okay, good. So in terms of moving ahead with staff's proposal here, it seems like there's a consensus maybe to push this. I'm sorry? Oh, one more. Let's have Councillor Andrews go ahead.
Through you,
Yep.
Your Worship, I was in fact going to just end up echoing your points about having staff having to make the changes to the timeline that we're talking about. So I'll let you continue, and I'll make my comments afterwards. Thank you.
And with Chief Kalinsky's comments a couple of minutes ago, you know, we did talk about openness and transparency, and we do want to learn about both police services once more, and when all of the facts are presented in a clear and concise manner, at that point, with the consultant's report as well, recommendations from town staff, at that point we'll be making this decision. So I think we need to maybe rejig this, and I'm going to suggest that we table this until next meeting, and let's rework this, Mr. Brennan, in order to nail down these dates in the fall more clearly, and perhaps talk to Chief Kalinsky a little bit further about what he would like to present. Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, I understand it's a very complex issue, and it's a very important issue that we're debating, and I think it's imperative that Council gets all the information, as much information as possible, to make a decision, a very important decision that will follow, be it December 10th or prior to December 10th. I spoke with Chief Kalinsky last week. The words of presenting the annual report were taken in error. It's meant to be the presentation from the Orangeville Police Services, as the Orangeville Police Services and their board deems they want to present to Council in order to get the information to Council. So I think to correct the report itself, and with respect to our chief, it certainly is meant to be the presentation as the chief sees fit to put forward to Council. The other issue is if we want to move to September, we can take the direction of Council tonight. We have been trying to squeeze some of this information in because, as you know, the summer is coming, people will be on vacation, but we would have to do it, I think, early in September, so maybe a back-to-back type scenario. If Council can, advise staff tonight if they would prefer to host those such Q&A sessions for OPS and OPP, the presentations and the Q&A sessions, in a Council meeting facilitated by yourself, Your Worship, or facilitated by someone else, that would help us greatly in planning dates and moving it forward. Also, if you want to hold it in another facility other than a town facility, then it's, if you give us the indication, then we can certainly try to, solidify that before we bring it back to Council if we need to bring it back. But in any case, we're just trying to get some direction from Council tonight so that we can plan and schedule accordingly.
Okay. You have on this chronology here, Mr. Brennan, September 9th/23rd, 2019, and that was for mayors and CEOs of other municipalities. So those are two Council dates, correct? 9th and 23rd of September. So should we pick those two dates as the presentation to Council by both OPS and OPP, and then push our ask of mayors of other municipalities who have chosen OPP and have rejected OPP to present in October?
Your Worship, I think that would work. And again, the intent of having the mayors or CAOs from another municipality, the intent was potentially selecting one that had transitioned to OPP. And if we do that, I would strongly recommend that we select one that did not transition to OPP.
Right. I think we're all in agreement that that would be good to hear of reasons why. So maybe we need to move this ahead rather than table it with council's permission here. If we choose those two dates of the 9th for the OPS to make their presentation, 23rd for OPP, costing questions, and then a date in October for mayors and CEOs of municipalities who have gone through the decision-making process for OPP. We got a, wow. Okay, Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Perhaps this would be directed to the chief. I'm just trying to get clarification, and Mr. Brennan, I believe you might have just touched on this. Are we looking at two different reports, like an annual report and then a presentation? So I'm just trying to get a difference as to, is that one of the same, or is that two different things? And I have another question as well after that.
Your Worship, through you, I would say that it's a presentation, and as the chief said, it certainly is different than the annual report. So we will set it up as a presentation from OPS, the chief or his staff, to present to council the information that they seem necessary to advise council and to provide council the information needed to make a decision going forward. So I see it as a presentation of information that OPS determines. I'm assuming that's, I see the chief acknowledging that that is exactly what it is.
Has the police typically given a council an annual report, per se, with other data?
Well, Your Worship, again, through you, the information normally is presented, and the chief and I had a discussion on this last week. It is presented at the Police Services Board, and we would get a copy of that. Council would get a copy of that. Chief Kalinske have clearly identified or clarified that he has not presented their annual report to council since he's been here. I think it was a practice in the past, but again, that was before my time. But in any case, the annual report does come to council in the form of the minutes and stuff from the Police Services Board.
And Your Worship, not that I'm trying to hog the time here, but I'm a little concerned if we were to bring the OPP and the OPI, if we give them the 9th and the 23rd, is this also going to be included with the regular other agenda items that could be quite polluted with things that has been held over the summer? And I just wonder if we're going to have too much on our plate to handle it. I would particularly like to keep them separate and have special meetings.
Special meeting. Okay.
I just feel that September 9th, I don't know about the rest of you, but I just think, you know, staff's got other things coming to us that maybe just too much on our plate.
Yeah. Okay, so we would have Monday the 20, let's see, what would that be, 16th, right? Could be a special meeting, perhaps, where Chief Kalinske and his staff could present to us at a special meeting, which will be specific to that. The thing that we have to clarify, though, is the idea behind these presentations was to elicit questions from our residents, right? And although council will have some questions, so, you know, is this the right forum here, or, you know, is it a council meeting, or is it a public meeting where we're going to be presenting this? And Councillor Andrews mentioned the last, 2 years ago, that meeting at ODSS, and it sounded like maybe questions of council, you thought that we should be present, but of course if we're there, then it's a council meeting. So anybody listening out there, all I can suggest to you is we're all available right now. We're all available by email. We're available personally and on the telephone. And I would suggest that if anybody has any questions or they wish to share any information with council, that they can get started on this now. And hopefully we'll be able to debate with people and discuss the issues now and through the next 5 or 6 months, and that questions of council will be answered in the appropriately during that time, right? So anyway, if you're out there, you want to contact us, we're here. So back to the chronology here. So if we can have a regular council meeting on the 9th then, and we're talking about a special meeting yet to be determined as council, or it's a public meeting on the 16th where Orangeville Police Service will have the opportunity to present what their service is offering our town and answer questions from the public, I believe, and council, I believe. And then the 23rd, we would have an OPP, similar question period at that point. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for the record, the 9th and 23rd work for me, the 16th does not. Maybe we could start the council meeting at 5 o'clock, and I don't know. But anyway, I'll leave that as it is. I have a question in regards to the consultant's report. We have a Q&A coming up September, August, and yet the consultant report isn't presented to council till October 21st. I think a lot of the questions that will be asked at the Q&A could probably be answered by the consultant's report. Is there any way that consultant's report could be given to us a little quicker? Through Your Worship, to Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, through you, I guess there's many different ways of looking at this, be it a council meeting facilitated by yourself or facilitated by an outside facilitator. The reality is some of those questions will come, I think, from the public, from our residents. Some will have to go directly to the OPS and OPP because they are the subject matter experts that's providing the service. It may be warranted in the future council meeting that members of council ask questions, and maybe members can come in from the public can come in and ask council questions. The reality is, though, normally the consultant will take all the materials put together. They may even look at some of the comments that are made at some of the OPP or OPS presentations, and they will make their comments on all the materials, including the financial, the level of services, and those issues. That really is the sort of the third-party view on all of this. So I would be hesitant to say that they could move it up much earlier than that, because there would be a large volume of material that they would be going through. So I wouldn't want to commit at this stage.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I'm probably going to repeat everything that has been said here. And I think that, this is an incredibly important issue. We got to do it right. We have to end up looking at ways of ensuring that the general public have an opportunity to make the comments that they want to make, hear what they have to hear, but we also too. And I think, to be fair to my fellow council as well, we have to make ourselves available. And I appreciate the fact that we also have professional lives, but we have to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear the information. If the timeline has to be altered, so be it. But we also respect the fact that town staff will be presenting us with a bunch of things, including budget, that we're going to have to go through in October and November. So compounding that is going to be very difficult. So I think what we have to be able to do, and this is where I think my request, and I think that Mayor Brown has certainly identified this, is we have to have somewhat of a revised timeline here, a schedule that ends up ticking all the boxes so that everything that needs to be included is taken care of, and within a timely fashion, so that we have the information that we need. I appreciate every comment that has been made here, and I think that we just have to make sure that we get this done right.
Okay. Councillor Peters. Hold on. Let me just get you on there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In discussing the specifics, I'm also not available on the 16th, so I would be in favor of either moving up the council meeting to finish by the time that a Q&A may start, for example.
Is it that week or that day?
It would be that week for me.
The week.
Yeah. So keeping the events within the council weeks, we've kind of planned ourselves around that. Obviously, I think as many have. So whether they went back to back or a Monday, Tuesday, if that can be arranged, obviously it's preferable because it's not something I would like to miss.
Okay. Councillor Taylor, you do travel quite a bit. Have you looked at your schedule at all? And hold on, let's. Councillor Andrews, did you have something to say? Okay, sorry. Let's go ahead, sir.
I appreciate you asking, Your Worship, but I don't have any conflicts at this time. I'll make sure I'm available and work with the rest of council to be available for such an important thing. So thank you for considering me.
Okay. So, Mr. Brennan, we've talking here about trying to nail this down tonight for September. Coming back off the summer, September 9th, just maybe have a regular council session that night. Does that make sense? And could we, the next day, would that make sense on the Tuesday to have a special council meeting then to allow the Orangeville Police Service to present on September the 10th to us?
Your Worship, we're crawling up on 8:30. Maybe if we take a 5 or 10-minute recess and I can consult with the clerk and we can go over some dates, and maybe instead of the back and forth in council, we'll come back and have some dates that we can present right away, and that way it may be clearer as we leave tonight's meeting, if that would work.
Okay, well,
council.
let's call a 10-minute recess here and we'll reconvene. Madam Clerk, could you please recap what we've determined here?
Thank you. What has been suggested is that we schedule meetings September 9th and 10th for the Orangeville Police Services and Ontario Provincial Police to present their community information sessions and question and answer sessions. The other municipalities inviting the mayor and CAO to speak to this council would be scheduled sometime in October, and the consultant's report presentation would be determined at a later date. At this point, we're just trying to firm up the dates. We'll schedule the location and determine what location is best for these presentations at a later time. So if council would like to make that motion to confirm that for staff.
Council, we good with that? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. We have 10.2. This is proposed tax rates and levies for 2019. This is a report dated May 27th that it be received, and the council adopt the property tax rates as proposed for 2019 fiscal year. Any comments from councillors? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Brennan. In the report, it's mentioning that it's minus 2.96% for the combined for the total residential tax rate. Just want to make the public aware that doesn't mean that taxes are going down minus 2.9% because we have another year of phase-in assessments. So perhaps, Mr. Brennan, can you tell me what the average phase-in assessment increase is for the residential class from last year to this year?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Sherwood, the average impact assessment increase from 2018 to 2019 was 6.02%.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion to receive this and approve it? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none? Okay, thank you. Now we have an issue here, 10.3, a water pollution control tender award. In reading through this report, town staff was surprised by the size of the tender here, that it was over the estimate, and that there's a request to transfer $900,000 from our wastewater reserve fund to allow for the refurbishment of digester number 1 in our water pollution control plant. Comments from Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Jones, I realize being in sort of the construction business somewhat that these things happen and we don't have a lot of recourse, and you know the market is what it is. What I'm hoping you can shed some light on is what is the next major expenditure to come out of that wastewater reserve fund? Where does this get us, and are we anticipating any other large tender projects coming down the line that we need to be aware of?
Mr. Jones.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters, I'm going to defer the question to Ms. McGinnity as she oversees environmental services, which includes wastewater services and the water pollution control plant.
Ms. McGinnity.
Through you, Your Worship, we did mention in the report that we are looking to do some major rehabilitation work on the digester 2 as well. We don't know yet what the scope of that project will be. We have had some issues with the floating roof this year. Once we get in there and clean it out, that could be another major expenditure that we are going to have to deal with in the short term. But at this point, I don't know what kind of dollar value is. We did just complete the major expansion and upgrades at the plant, so a lot of the work that we expected to do has been completed already, and it'll just be ongoing maintenance and repairs at the plant going forward.
So just a question on this overage. I presume that town staff had identified a budget number, and that was carried in our budget, and that as the process unfolded, we found we were short. So going forward, you said digester number 2, Ms. McGinnity, you're going to be estimating a value which will be in a budget in the future, and likely this problem won't happen again. Is that correct? Or we won't have to dip into reserves if it's carried within a budget, correct?
That is correct. We want to get in there and do a structural inspection first. So once we get the digester cleaned out, we'll have a better idea of what kind of rehabilitation work would need to be done at that digester.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Jones, or perhaps he will redirect it to staff. I'm just trying to work the math here. You're wanting the total project budget to $2,662,500, but the lowest tender is $2,379,603. Am I misreading where the difference in the funds are going?
Ms. McGinnity.
Or Mr. Jones? No, sorry.
Oh, Mr. Jones, okay. Go ahead, Mr.
Through
Jones.
your worship to Councillor Sherwood, the difference is in the design costs by the consultant. We hired a consultant to do the design work, so the overall project costs include both design and construction.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to thank Ms. McGinty for this excellent presentation. It's very clear to me what happened. I can see the steps and the unfortunate circumstances. It's frustrating, but you know, obviously supportive of going forward. I guess my question would be to staff. I assume this is to you, Mr. Brennan, but I'm not quite certain. My concern is about the balance that's in the reserve fund. So right now we have 4.2 million, which is, you know, a healthy figure. We're going to take out another 900,000. What does this do to us for future budgets, and do we need to talk about that reserve fund as we go forward, or are we good? What would be your recommendation? Oh, it's to Mr. Jones? It's Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones.
Good.
Sir.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Taylor, every year when we put together our water and our wastewater budget, the budget is for our operating costs. What we have in the budget as well as our revenue, and we collect water and wastewater revenue based on the amount of water that is consumed and flows through water meters. The amount of money that we collect far exceeds our operating costs every year, and the difference is what is transferred into reserves. So with every water bill that is paid, there's a continuous transfer of funds into reserves, and the amount of money that's transferred into reserves is to cover off capital costs of this very sort. We will be going through a project over the course of the summer and fall to redo our water and wastewater rate study, which we do once every 5 years, and we'll be coming back to council late this year with recommendations to set up the rate structure for the next 5 years. It will include our anticipated capital costs, including this particular project, which has been somewhat more expensive than we anticipated, such that we ensure that we're collecting sufficient revenue to offset these and other expected costs.
Right. And just to be clear, this is not a tax levy issue. This is a water rate issue.
It's a wastewater rate issue, yes, Your Worship.
Any other questions from council? No? Okay, so we need a motion to receive and approve this expenditure. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Peters. All in favor? That item is passed. Thank you. 10.4, we have a heritage permit application regarding 90 Mill Street. Any questions from councillors here? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Taylor.
No, Your Worship, I have no questions. I'd just like to say I read the report, and I'm quite pleased to see that Heritage Orangeville was so involved in it, and it gives me great confidence to be able to go forward. So I'd just like to make the motion that we receive and move forward with this initiative.
Do you have a seconder for that? Councillor Peters, all in favor? Okay, moving on. We have minutes from the Sustainable Orangeville meeting of April 16th, a recommendation that the meeting minutes be received. Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Moving on to item 12 on our agenda, question period. Are there any questions from the gallery tonight? Seeing none, oh, Adam, come on up. Mr. Thompson, how are you? Good, good.
I'm at Shirley Street. I've not seen lights on Shirley Street. I've been seeing a lot of people are not, excuse me. Thank you. I've been hearing a lot of people with no cars going around they're banned around on Dawson and Shirley Street. I've been hearing a lot of engines and all that is going around on my street, and it's really annoying because I've been hearing this through my bedroom window because I always have my window open at night, and I can hear things going through the night, and it really bugs people.
So are you complaining about noise or light, Adam, or both?
Noise.
Noise, okay. So there's cars racing on your street?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. All right. So you're talking about, you're looking for lights in terms of stop lights or stop signs? Is that
Yes,
what you're
stop signs.
suggesting? Okay. Well, I can tell you that council and staff are looking at other traffic calming measures throughout the town. So we'll take note of Shirley Street, Adam, and maybe Deputy Mayor McIntosh or myself will get back to you once we talk to town staff, okay?
Thank you very
All
much.
right. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience tonight? Okay, we have some correspondence, starting with 13.1. This is the announcement on May 15th by the provincial government, More Homes, More Choice. Any comments from councillors on that item? No. We have 13.2, Niagara Escarpment Commission. This is a notification about candidates for appointment to the NEC. Seeing no comments. Township of Mulmer, this is correspondence regarding aggregate extraction. 13.4 from the Township of Mulmer, a memo regarding library funding cuts. And then 13.5 is a memo from the Island Lake Rowing Club inviting town council to participate in a community rowing challenge. So may I have a motion to receive this correspondence? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Thank you. Now we have notices of motion given prior to the meeting. 15.1, a motion from Councillor Post regarding instituting a diversity and inclusion committee. Councillor Post's motion is here. Councillor Post, do you wish to read the motion? Okay, go ahead. Sorry. All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll just go ahead and read my notice of motion, which is, whereas it is important for the town of Orangeville to display leadership on matters related to gender parity, racial, cultural, and LGBTQ issues, and any other matters related to equity, inclusion, and diversity. And whereas the proposed Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plan calls for the development of a diversity and inclusion plan, therefore be it resolved that Council approve the creation of a Diversity and Inclusion Committee to provide consultation, advice, report findings, and make recommendations to Council on matters and items related to diversity, inclusivity, and equity. That the Diversity and Inclusion Committee be composed of X number of members of Council and X members of the public, representing a broad range from within the community, including representatives from diverse groups, national origin, ethnicity, language, race, color, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, etc., and that staff be directed to report to Council with recommended terms of reference and membership for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Post. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to say to the town of Orangeville and to my fellow council members how proud I am to sit beside Councillor Post and the fact that she's put this motion forward. And I'd just like to say that I'd love to sit beside you in the passenger seat as you work through this with the town. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Good. Any other comments from councillors? So we have a motion on the floor from Councillor Post, seconder, Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Okay, that motion is passed, and staff will report back to us with recommended terms of reference, and I guess consult with Councillor Post on membership of this committee. 15.2, we have a notice of motion from Councillor Sherwood. This is regarding the opt-out of the commercial/industrial vacancy rebate program. Councillor Sherwood, would you like to speak to this? I'm sorry, I'll have to light you up. There you go.
You would like me to read my motion, Your Worship?
I think you should, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I apologize for the length.
Wow, okay, hang on.
Okay.
No.
It'll take us till 11 o'clock. No. Whereas Section 364 of the Municipal Act 2001 and Ontario Regulation 325/01 states that every municipality shall have a program to provide tax rebates to owners of property that have vacant portions if the property is in any of the commercial or industrial tax classes. The Municipal Act requires the amount of this rebate must be between 30 and 35%. And whereas announced in a previous Ontario budget, municipalities have broad flexibility to opt out or reduce the rebate amount of the business vacancy rebate and reduction programs. And whereas in the town of Orangeville, the amount refunded in 2018 for the 2017 vacancy tax rebate program resulted in a loss of property tax revenue of $78,774 for the town of Orangeville, $35,426 for the county of Dufferin, $2,400 for the BIA, and $76,492 for the local school boards. And whereas 25 of the 31 properties who received a vacancy rebate for 2017 had previously received a rebate in one or both of the 2 previous years, and in some cases more. And whereas the vacancy tax rebate program contributes to the commercial and industrial buildings remaining vacant for extended periods of time, thus inhibiting potential development and having an overall negative economic impact on the community in which they are situated. And whereas council opt out of the property tax rebate program for vacancy units as part of an effort to better encourage use of such properties for the benefit of the community. And whereas the vacancy tax rebate program results in both a loss of property tax revenue and increases the administration workload. And whereas the decision to opt out of the vacancy tax rebate program must be made in conjunction with the Council of County of Dufferin. Therefore, be it resolved that Orangeville Town Council requests Dufferin County Council to consider opting out of the vacancy tax rebate program, and that the councils of the County of Dufferin and the Town of Orangeville direct staff to discuss the issues, process, and options, and report back to the representative councils. And further, that a copy of this resolution be sent to the County of Dufferin and all of the municipalities within the County of Dufferin to advise of Orangeville Town's Council's interest in seeking abolishment of the vacancy tax rebate program.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh, or Deputy Mayor McIntosh, excuse me.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I'd like to second this motion. This is one of those things you just shake your head at and wonder why. We're rewarding or encouraging landlords to keep their units empty, which is, artificially increasing the rent rates. So I absolutely support this. It's long overdue. And I would also like to add that I've talked to some members of County Council, and again, as Councillor Sherwood said, this is county-wide. This isn't just Orangeville. It has to be done county-wide. And I've got nothing but positive feedback so far, so I'm hoping there will be no issues. Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, perhaps, to Mr. Brennan, or Councillor Sherwood, can you shed some light on the intent behind this rule? Obviously, it is detracting from the taxes we collect as a town. It may not be encouraging the best rent situations in town, but obviously when it was implemented there was a rationale for it, and I can't wrap my head around it, but perhaps there's a history there that I don't understand. So whoever would like to field that question, certainly.
Well, I believe that in times of recession that it was a way to give landlords some sort of a break. However, with all due respect to our commercial industrial landlords here in town, they're all generally multimillionaires that have other holdings, and I think asking the town to be partners is something that we need to address. So I'm glad that Councillor Sherwood has brought this in front. For those who don't know, the City of Toronto abolished this, just this such bylaw in July, I believe July 1st, 2018, and there's other municipalities across the province that are now addressing this because the province has given us the option of opting out of giving a rebate for vacant. And, you know, I'm just going to highlight one particular situation, and that was, you'll remember Blockbuster Video, which is was on Broadway and has transitioned to Global Pet Foods. The space where Global left has been vacant since July 2012, 7 years now, and they've received a property tax rebate for 7 years, and it's many, many, many thousands of dollars. And as a commercial realtor, I don't quite understand why we're giving a rebate in that case. I think that space is good commercial retail space. It should have been rented out. It could have been rented out. And I think this idea of us partnering with these landlords on this issue has to end. So, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two points. One is I'd like to congratulate Councillor Sherwood on the longest notice of motion this council. So good for you. You win. Number two is thank you for bringing this forward, and it would be my honor again to support it. Some really great ideation from my fellow council members tonight. I'm quite pleased. So not my idea to bring it forward, but my idea to support. And I just think it's important that when residents bring things up, we recognize them and kind of check it off the list that it's been recognized. So to Jody Richardson, if you're watching tonight, who closed her hair for flair and made it a point to point this out, that there was this practice going on, council looks like it's going to fulfill closing that loophole tonight. So this council listens, and I'm pleased to support you, Councillor Sherwood, and thank you for bringing this forward.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify with Councillor Peters his question. Tax reform happened in the Mike Harris government in the early 2000s, which resulted in a complete overhaul change in taxation. And the City of Toronto had the farthest cry with the commercial property owners. And this was the provincial government's way of saying, we'll help you out. The fact now that City of Toronto, who actually initiated, was the reason this all came about because of tax reform, the fact that they have now opted out of that, the timing's right, and it's okay now, I think, to say, you know, they've had 18 or 19 years of rebates, and I think it's time to put closure.
Councillor Taylor, you had one more comment?
I'm sorry, no, I'm not sure why that was on there, Your Worship.
So, all right, Councillor Sherwood has a motion on the table, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Okay, thank you. 15.3, this is a motion from Councillor Peters. I don't know if you'd like to give us a Coles Notes version of this, Councillor Peters, because this is almost as long as Councillor Sherwood's motion. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'll save everybody. Mine's not quite as verbose, but perhaps just as dry to some people paying attention. But I think it's important to address because as we see a number of bills and legislation coming down from the province and their impact on municipalities, and the town of Orangeville obviously has a lot to do with some of those decisions. This one in general has some good pieces in terms of housing mix and development, but what it does in a lot of ways is take some of the decision making away from local staffs and council. It also threw in a number of in the omnibus bill, it kind of threw in a number of other acts that were related to development, but really related to its acceleration, which, you know, in terms of red tape may be a good thing, but in terms of environmental protection and local culture and decision making, would not be. And so I've sort of laid those out in this motion, speaking to those aspects within the bill that I believe the town should take a stance on, or council should take a stance on, and that includes changes to the Conservation Act, changes to the Endangered Species Act, and changes from relating to the OMB and LPAT. So looking at planning, decision-making, timelines for approvals, development charge structure, stuff like that. So without going through it in detail, that's sort of the high-level overview.
Okay. Any other councillors like to comment on Councillor Peters' motion? Councillor Post.
I'm happy to second this motion, first of all. And the one thing that I thought it was important to, I know you didn't want to read it all out, but the one thing that was really important to highlight to anybody who's listening out there is the one portion of the motion that says that Bill 108 will once again allow an unelected, unaccountable body to make decisions on how our communities evolve and grow. And I thought that that piece in there was extremely important to highlight. It is one of the problems, one of the many problems with that bill, is that it is allowing unelected and unaccountable people make decisions on how our communities are evolving. And I thought that it was really great that that was put in there, and I just wanted to highlight that, and I'm happy to second your motion.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you. I'll just speak to that briefly. A lot of municipalities are putting forward very similar motions, and full disclosure, some of this language is coming from other towns as we look to their leadership and to join in having our voice. So a quick nod to the town of Aurora and the town of Oakville that have drafted similar motions.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion by Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Okay, thank you. We have, I don't believe we have any notices of motion at the meeting. And I'm unaware of any, oh, Councillor Taylor. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to ask a question. Is unfinished business, is that where we are?
Yeah, sure.
I apologize to everyone. It wasn't clear to me. I received a phone call from Narinder Singh, who spoke at our last meeting, and he was just asking about the Orangeville Sikh Society and, next steps in terms of planting trees. And we'd left it that town staff was going to get back. It is tree planting time, and I'm just not aware of where that finished, and he wasn't either. And I was wondering if we can get clarification.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Taylor. The motion we made was to take that issue to Sustainable Orangeville, and we'll be meeting the first week of June, and that issue will be on the agenda to discuss. Given the season, I would imagine that we'll have to hit the fall planting season for any initiative to give town staff a couple months preparation, perhaps get CVC involved with species list or make sure we get the plantings correct. So it will be on an agenda at the next Sustainable Orangeville meeting. For anyone that's interested, it'll be June 4th at 7 o'clock in council chambers.
Thank you, Councillor Peters, for clarifying that. Any other unfinished business, councillors? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm kind of backtracking a little bit, but back to the tax rate report. I meant to just thank staff for, maybe it's coincidental, but I want to thank staff for picking the due dates that coincide with CPP payments and old age security payments being for our elderly citizens.
Great, thank you. Once again, any other unfinished business? No. Seeing none. Any new business? I don't believe we have any. Okay, we have confirming bylaw. May I have a motion to have that confirming bylaw? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? And may we have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Concludes our meeting. What do you